show a picture so people can write this down. All right, as soon as we get to that point. So here we go. Let's go ahead and start on page 34, 35, 30. Book. Let's get rid of this music. All right, let's get started. 41 on the PDF. All right, thank you. Stop. You must read this first. This is different from all other writings about Frantz Fanon. So there are things you have to know before you start. Frantz Fanon was one of the most influential revolutionary theorists of the anti-colonial rebellions, especially in the USA. But today, almost all of the thousands of books and articles on his work are by the careerist professors that Fanon so distrusted. Though those he called the willy intellectuals. This study guide was written by one of those poor rebels from whom Fanon wrote his great book, Wretched of the Earth, in the first place. In his introduction, Fanon, Jean-Pierre Sartre says that, quote, that the third world finds itself and speaks to itself through his voice, because Frantz Fanon was a black man from the French colonial of Martinique in the Caribbean, who found himself as a French medical psychologist in Algeria during their anti-colonial war, deserting to the side of the Algerian guerrillas. Fanon wrote Wretched of the Earth as a political guide for all those who were natives, the colonized like himself. Fanon is most often spoken by the middle-class intellectuals as a shocking political philosopher of radical violence against the white settlers, because in his writings he leapt over the heads of political parties and their ideologies, speaking directly to individuals on their need to personally take part in revolutionary violence, as well as the need for the oppressed as a whole for the liberating psychological, cultural, and political effects of that violence. Hold on a second. I'm surprised Doodley's not here. Let me do something. I'm gonna do this. Sorry, Dooley usually is here, but I don't know why he's not here. That layer of Fanon's thinking is real, but to Yaki, it hasn't the center of Fanon's politics. In part because to Yaki, it was, quote, been there, done that. One of those young natives, quote unquote, from the inner city streets who had picked up Fanon on in the 1960s with the careless eagerness, who had experienced armed expropriation and violence against the white settlers. Yaki eventually found out that beneath the too easy snapshot of Fanon as a race thinker was the underlying structure of Fanon's communalist and communist politics. Here, Yaki is on a mission to make up for the misunderstanding of Fanon's politics that he and so many of his young rebel comrades once had. To help guide the study by newer rebels of this complex and difficult reading, as part of his framework, Yaki chose a running critique of what was probably the most popular single book on Fanon, Deborah Warwick's illustrated Fanon for Beginners. Wyrick's administration for Fanon and her belief in his importance for people of color gives her quick introduction of Fanon as fresh feeling, but in his characteristics, bullet on target way. Yaki brushes all that aside to show how over and over in ways both crude and subtle, Wyrick's writings distorts and even lies about Fanon's basic politics. Yaki's study guide is a reminder that in studying, we have to keep our eyes on the political answers being given. Fanon talked to social. Fanon's talk of socialism may seem outdated. Hold on a second, everybody. I gotta fix this problem. Great. All right, got it fixed. All right. Sorry, everybody. Oh, let's see here. I'm going to reread this paragraph. Sorry. Here, Yaki is on a mission to make up for the misunderstandings of Fanon's. Wait. Hold on. I'm gonna go back because I had that layer of Fanon's thinking is real, but to Yaki, it wasn't the center of Fanon's politics. In part because to hold on a second, everybody. Get in there. Get. Jesus. You dogs are driving me. You guys are making me. Ah! Sorry, everybody. It's the dogs. The dogs are doing some weird things. Sorry. The layer of Fanon's thinking is real, but to Yaki, it wasn't the center of Fanon's politics. In part because to Yaki, it was, quote, been there, done that. One of those young natives from the inner city streets who had picked up Fanon in the 1960s with careless eagerness, who had experienced armed expropriation and violence against white settlers. Yaki eventually found out that beneath the too easy snapshot of Fanon as a race thinker was the underlying structure of Fanon's communist politics. Here, Yaki is on a mission to make up for the misunderstanding of Fanon's politics that he and so many of his young rebel comrades had once had. To help guide the study by newer rebels of this complex and difficult reading, as part of his framework, Yaki chose a running critique of what is probably the most popular single book on Fanon. Deberon Warwick illustrates Fanon for beginners. Warwick's admiration of Fanon and her beliefs in his importance for people of color gives her quick introduction to Fanon's fresh feeling. But in his characteristics, bullet on target way, Yaki brushes all that aside to show how over and over, in ways both crude and subtle, Warwick's writing distorts and even lies about Fanon's basic politics. Yaki's study guide is a reminder that in studying we have to keep our eyes on the political answer being given. Fanon's talk of socialism may seem outdated now after the fall of bureaucratic state socialism around the world, but in really listening to Fanon's Wretched, we discovered that his socialism is a communal rebellion of a grassroots villages against the capital, of the poor against the political parties that pretend to act in their name, of young armed rebels against officials and leaders, and communities against capitalism. It is still more than ever our rebellion. Much of this was written before Yaki left prison, and all of it due to Yaki's untimely illness and death before the phenomenon of Obambi, before the selection of some people of color to more so dramatically unto top positions in the white settler power structure, which has baffled many young rebels, just as the popular enthusiasm over one of our own, waving from Air Force One or leading White House Easter egg rolls, has made people soften their punches. It's what happens when anti-colonial rebellion is defeated and new neo-colonial programs are installed by the ruling class. Although Yaki didn't get a chance to point this out, Fanon himself reminds us capitalism massively turns to playing the race card that it itself invented long ago after all. In other words, capitalism turns to black leaders and even black political parties to sustain its hegemony over the now neo-colonized world. Several important practical matters about this text Yaki meant for his study guide to be read back and forth, side by side, with reading Wretched of the Earth, Wretched itself. But he realized there were Wretched editions of different sizes being sold, which meant that the same passage would appear on different pages, depending on whether you had the hardback, trade paperback, or mass market paperback edition. So he devised an intricate system of counting paragraphs within chapters for letting his readers locate whatever wretched passage he was discussing in whatever copy they had. Only the original English translation of all versions that he and everyone else were using was replaced by the publishers with a different translation. The original edition with the translation Yaki used became sacred, scarce books, hard to find and often expensive. Starting a decade ago, a new edition was put out with a new English translation, a translation that was supposed to be less awkward and more up to date in its phrasing. Whatever its merits in that sense, it is also true that the Willy intellectuals have taken over Fanon's own book. A big name Harvard professor was appointed as the editor of the new edition, and he and the new translator both got to publish new individual introductions, essentially promoting themselves inside the covers of Fanon's book. Even though it was now less available, Yaki continued to use the old translation because it was less academic, less literary, and because Yaki felt that it was the truer to the rough spirit of Fanon's rebel stand. Yeah. So, with no easy choices, the editor have left Yaki's numbering system for locating passages he was quoting or referring to just as it was, but to help readers who don't have a copy of the new scarce earlier edition, in some cases where Yaki is talking about a key discussion in Fanon, the editor have added some more of Fanon's discussion from that passage. These questions are set aside in shaded boxes running along the side of the page or at the page bottom. The other thing is that Meditations is an unfinished work. Yaki wrote different parts at different times, so in places his use of italics or bold text for emphasis was not consistent. He had completed the contents of the first three parts, and part 1 and 2 were actually published as small pamphlets, but had not gone back over the standardized the style and grammar. The copy editors not wanting to blur the individuality of his writing, only corrected typos, but changed nothing else. As for part 4, it was never completed. It started out as a rough first draft, where trial words were mixed with notes to himself to add this or say that. Often such notes to him were marked by special brackets, like this. It has the double brackets. Soon enough, it is mostly notes and possible quotes to be used. The chapter is choppy, fragmentary, but will still roughly completes an arc. The projected parts 5 and 6 that Yaki came to think were necessary, never as far as the editor knows, saw paper or were even in outline form. His cancer came on too rapidly and lethally for that. We will have to work without this. Still, meditation is a major work, and in one sense, it really is complete. Yaki never forgot how he first read Fanon, but didn't really understand it. So, meditations, above all, tries to teach us how to read seriously, critically, for ourselves. It was always our task to finish this path for ourselves, and it is on us now. Now, I might not have the right edition, so I might not be able to do that. So we'll find out. Let's see how this works. Meditations of Frantz Fanon, Wretched of the Earth. All right, part 1. By the way of introductions. Comrades, today I started the 5th draft of this piece. My original intent had been to shape it from print and for distribution among a wide and rather academic audience. However, I have abandoned that aim for 2 reasons. First, because I'm anxious to complete this project and more on to others. Second, I want to return to the style of writing similar to that used to produce book 1 of the journal, i.e., when I wasn't concerned about style or about meeting the assumed expectations of an academic audience. I hope that this meditations will prove useful to you. They give me an opportunity to work out some ideas and to put some of them onto paper as seeds, hopefully, for later development. I strongly suggest that none of you be content with merely reading these reflections. You should study and reflect upon your own copy of Wretched, the sources that I list, and any other related materials. A note of citation, because there are several editions of Wretched in print. I'm using the Grover Press First Evergreen Edition, 1966. I am not using the standard form of citations with reference to page numbers. Instead, I'm using a chapter and paragraph form. I've designated the chapters as follows. So, if you all want to, here's what you're all following along. Here is what he's talking about. If you all want to write that down. So, preface equals P. Concerning violence equals, I don't know if that's an I or a 1. Oh, it is a 1. Violence in the international context, 1A. Spontaneity, its strength and weaknesses, equals 2. The pitfall of national consciousness equals 3. On national culture, 4. Reciprocal bases of national culture and the fight for freedom, 4A. Colonial war and mental disorders, equals 5. Conclusion is C. That's it. I hope you all got that down. Let me know if you need more time. I'm going to write them down myself. See how this works out for me. I don't know where Doodley's at. Usually Doodley's here. So this is the key. So we're going to say preface equals P, remember? And then concerning violence equals 1. concerning violence in the international context is 1A. And then the pitfall, wait, spontaneity its strength. Hold on, I'm still spelling, sorry everybody. And weaknesses. Is 2. Okay? Doodley is here. Oh, nice. Nice, Doodley. You coming up? And then the pitfall. The pitfall is pitfalls of national consciousness is 3. Now give me a second. Is 3. And then on national culture is 4. And then, oh my gosh, the reciprocal basis of national culture. So I think that's a different part. Let me say hold on, sorry everybody, I'm taking forever. Okay, and on that is the fight for freedom and the fight for freedom. That one is 4A. And then last, but, oh wait, no, 2 more. Colonial war. And mental disorder is 5. And then last but not least, conclusion is C.
لا أرجوكم طرحوني بهدية الله يوفقكم.
So I'm going to keep this next to me and see if this will help. So we're going to see if I can do this. I don't know if I can do this, everybody. I don't know if I can do this, honestly. We'll find out. Okay, so let's move on. All right. I've also numbered each paragraph separately for each chapter so that, for example, P1 cites the first paragraph of the preface. 2.5 cites the 5th paragraph of the 2nd chapter because it's 2.5. So 2, 2nd chapter, 5, 5th paragraph. So yes, 4A2, oh my gosh, this might be hard, cites the 2nd paragraph of reciprocal bases, and C3 cites the 3rd paragraph of the conclusion. Okay, so C3 is conclusion. 4A, okay, 4A chapter 2, okay. NB, from my reading of Wretched of the Earth, I've determined that chapter 1A, violence in the international context, is actually the first part of the conclusion. That is, I believe they were separated by the editor/publisher and not by Fanon. Nevertheless, I think they should be read as part of a whole. 1, background on how and why the project was begun. 2A, the project was initially inspired by the reading of the paper by Ron Karinga, in which he cited Fanon
and a number of others, i.g., Cabral, Du Bois, Lenin, and Gramsci, in support of his contention that the petty bourgeois intellectuals, or the petty bourgeois class as a whole, at some points, he lumps them these together, play, quote, the decisive role in the theoretical and practical project of liberation. My emphasis, I believe that Karenga had distorted Fanon and others, and on this question, I happened to have a copy of Wretched, and I went to it to first check the lines that Karenga had quoted or paraphrased, and then to search the entire book for all references to petty bourgeoisie and to intellectuals. During this time, I mentioned, oh my gosh, I got a warning already, everybody. Bastards. Okay. During this time, I mentioned to Amercall that I was checking out Wretched, and that I had gained new insight into some of the issues that now confront us. He suggested that I write something that would help unravel the book's complexities, because he had recently encountered young activists who'd pick up Wretched only to put it down before completing it because they found it too hard to read. I don't feel up to the task, nor did I want to put other projects to the side in order to give time to this. However, while not fully committed to writing on Wretched of the Earth, I did begin to study it more meticulously, primarily for my own benefit, but also knowing that such studies would be necessary should I decide to do a breakdown of sorts for the audience of young activists, and attempt to emphasize the relevancy of the book's subject matters to our struggle, i.e., to strongly suggest that the book is relevant to the contemporary issue, and that Fanon is as worthy of attention, if not more so, than most of the contemporary public intellectuals and activist scholars, feigning a radical or revolutionary stance these days. As times pass. Oh, wait, is there someone in here? Hopefully. No one's in there. Oh well, I thought Dooley would be up. As time passes, I began to feel as though I was experiencing something of the revelation, all the more so because I wasn't unfamiliar with the book. I'd read it for the first time in 1967 or 1968. I can't recount the number of times that I've opened its pages, to check a reference or to read a few pages as a way to obtaining inspiration or orientation. I became convinced that I should write something, if only for myself and my comrades. That something is what you now hold in your hands. LB. B1B. What is 1B? 1 is concerning violence. I don't know what B means. Doesn't tell me. This is where I thought I was going to get hard time. Okay. If you complete the reading of a nonfiction book today, you'll usually feel as though you know what it's about, that you've got it, and don't have to return to it. However, if you pick up that book a month from now or a year from now, you're bound to be surprised when it appears that you're reading lines that weren't there originally. You'll gain new insight into certain concepts that you thought you'd fully understood. You'll gain an understanding of propositions that had previously shot past you. What happens between the first reading and the second? You've grown, had more experience, acquired more knowledge, become able to make more connections, grasp nuances that previously slipped through unnoticed and unappreciated. It took me several readings before I was able to make out the outline of the forest of Wretched. It was at this point that I could begin to distinguish sections within each chapter, and I then began to number the paragraphs of each chapter and to read and meditate upon one paragraph at a time, then one section at a time. Sometimes I'd read through 3 or 4 paragraphs, or 2 or 3 sections, then start over again. For example, I divided concerning violence into 8 sections: paragraphs 1 through 6, 7 through 15, 16 through 30, 31 through 44, 45 through 66, 67 through 76, 77 through 87, and 88 through 99. Now, I know that some people will resist the adoption of a similar method, but I strongly suggest that anyone desiring to fully understand this book adopt a similar process. I've come across several references to Wretched made by academics, i.g. Cornel West, and it seems to me that they don't understand the book, and maybe a reread would help them assume, of course, that they really want to be helped, since so many of them are representatives of a willy intellectuals that Fanon scorched in, I think it's 124, where he says, I think right here it says, additions, okay, hold on. Editor notes in some cases where Yaki is talking about a key discussion of Fanon's, the editor have added some more of Fanon's discussion from that passage. When the editor have decided to do so, all such added Fanon quotations were set aside on shaded boxes running along the side of the page or at the bottom of the page. Okay. Let me see here. It's on, I think it's on violence, isn't it? One second, I'm looking at something here real quick. That's Pierre Cetri. Yeah, it's what? I think I'm trying to do this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. I'm trying to see if I can do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. No, this is going to be too hard for me. I'm going to go over this a little bit tomorrow. Okay. On the side, it says, before I read on, I think I'm going to read the side first. It says, on the side, it says, but, okay, let me read this section. Okay. Cornel West, okay, made by academics, i.g. Cornel West, and it seems to me that they don't understand the book, and maybe a reread would help them, assuming, of course, that they really want to be helped, since so many of them are representatives of the willy intellectuals that Fanon scorched. But it so happens sometimes that decolonization occurs in areas which have not been sufficiently shaken by the struggles for liberation, and there may be found those same know-all, smart, willy intellectuals. We find interacts in them the manners and forms of thought picked up during their association with the colonialist bourgeoisie, spoiled children of yesterday colonialism. That's about like people like Cornel West. So let me read that again. But it so happens sometimes that decolonization occurs in areas which have not been sufficiently shaken by the struggle for liberation, and that there may be found those same know-alls, smart, willy intellectuals. We find intact in them the matter and forms of thought picked picked up during their association with the colonialist bourgeoisie, spoiled children, and of yesterday's colonialism. All right, I'm gonna read another side of it. In the underdeveloped countries, experience proves that the important thing is not that 300 people form a plan and decide upon carrying it out, but that the whole people plan and decide, even if it takes them twice or 3 times as long. The fact is that the time taken up by explaining the time lost in treating the workers as a human being will be caught up in the execution of the plan. People must know where they are going and why. Another restriction. Why is this a restriction? All right. The process, the proposed process is also time consuming. And some folks will feel that they could be reading other more contemporary books and not, quote, wasting time with this one. I'm reminded of a section of Wretched that someone applies here. Oh, okay, now I get it. 3.85. It's not about being fast or reading everything that's published or of reading whoever's seems to be most popular at the moment. Don't let the market dictate your taste. Time taking to fully grasp this book will be made up in the better practice of the development of consciousness that results from adopting this method. Time taken to read and reread Wretched will enable you to, 1, discern the BS in some of other stuffs that you read. 2, make more relevant connections to the issue and concepts that you confront on a daily basis. 1C, which is 1C is conclusions. Okay. The cover of my edition of Wretched says that it's Fanon's study of the problem of racism and colonialism in the world today. Colonialism confronts us today in a unique form, i.e., forms always differ from one country to another, shaping the context of our engagement with radicalized capitalist exploitation, internal class struggles, the nature and role of armed politics, relations between the people and the organizations that claim to represent them, Pan-Africanism/internationalism, the relation between our people and their allies in the imperialist state, the strengths and weaknesses in the theory and practice of nationalism, the struggle for socialism. All this and more is spoken by Fanon's in Wretched, and there are nuances and connections to our situation that we can't afford to ignore. While reading Wretched, it is of course necessary to base ourselves on the concrete reality out of which it came and primarily speaks to. However, we must also be able to see the general in the particular, and the particular in the general, and to recognize the extent of our reality is being described and critiqued, the extent of to which Fanon points the way forward for us, or I think maybe US, I think it's for us. It helps to know going in that Fanon speaks of several voices. So to speak, he uses the voice of the native or black person, they use the N-word, who during the colonial period, before the fighting starts, avoids confrontation with colonialism and directs all physical and psychological violent impulses inwardly, while being envious of the position of the colonialist, because they don't have the power or the strength or even the the conscious level to point to the direction of why all this disparity is happening. He speaks of the voice of the ex-native, the ex-black person, who have decided to redirect physical and psychological violence towards the colonialist, is not yet fully conscious, suffers setbacks, and allows the betrayals of the bourgeois forces that claim to speak for and to lead the struggle. And he speaks in the voice of the person who's overthrown colonialism, only to now confront neocolonialism, realizing that national independency itself isn't the end of the struggle, and that the fully new people will develop only with the construction of the fully new social order. So it looks like you have to put in parallel. If we develop a fully new person, we have to have a society that's fully new social order. Fanon is carrying us through the process of decolonization, through the stages of struggle for national independency and social revolution. However, he doesn't take us through a, quote, linear progression, as Western conventions may have it. At one point, he'll be talking about conditions and consciousness characteristics of the period of colonization or the colonial period. This is the first voice heard during the peaceful stage between colonial conquest and the beginning of the struggle to decolonize. He'll then move to some reference or discussions of the decolonization period that between the beginning of the struggle and the winning of independence, he may not always leave easily recognizable signs of transition. In the third chapter, he tends to move from the decolonization stage to the post-independence or neocolonial stage, then back again. Therefore, one must be able to distinguish the terms used to describe the several stages, because an inability to do so or a failure to do so can lead to confusion and a feeling that the book is too complex. Fanon treats the major themes in the same way, i.e., violence is not left to the first chapter, but actually runs from cover to cover. Spontaneity of violence is taking up initially in the first chapter. The racism and or Manichaean ideology, i.e., those which are dualistic and present things in a black and white fashion of both the colonizer and the colonized, or treated to particularly from cover to cover. How could these themes not be so treated since we're dealing with the process and the stages of the evolution of people's consciousness, social revolution, and social development? Maybe I should suggest that the chapters be read in the following order. First, read the preface. Then read chapters 2, 1, and 2, and 5 as part of a whole. Then read chapter 3 and 4 and 4a, also as part of a whole. Then read 1a, which is not so much about violence as it is about reparations. And the conclusion, again, A1, and the conclusions are, I contend, part of a whole. Chapter 1 introduces the theme of colonial violence and revolutionary violence, i.e., that the violence of colonialism isn't merely physical or military, and that the violence of the oppressed peoples, once redirected, must also take another than physical or armed forms. Chapter 2 is also on the theme of colonial and revolutionary violence, but focuses on the spontaneity of the initial forms of people's violence, a spontaneity essentially characterized by its lack of coherence, consciousness, and foresight. Chapter 5, read chapter 5 with chapter 1 and 2 because it deals with violence and the need for the liberatory process to concern itself with all sectors of the personality. 5.182, which we're going to read down below, chapter 3, is about class struggle and what could be called Fanon's theoretical premises for the deconstruction of race. Chapter 4 and 4A deal with the formation of new national identity with a focus on the need to deconstruct blackness and hood, what they use the N word with N-I with the ER hood. Okay, then down here it says, right here. Let me see here. Perfect. So the Algerian, this is, they have the passage from the book. Here we go. The Algerian's criminality is impulsivity, and the violence of his murderers are therefore not a consequence of the organization of his nervous system, nor the characteral originality, but the direct product of the colonial situation. The fact that the soldiers of Algeria have discussed this problem, that they are not afraid of questioning the beliefs fostered among them by colonialism. Once again, the objective of the native who fights against himself is to bring about the end of domination. But he ought equally to pay attention to the liquidation of all untruths implanted in his being by oppression under a colonial regime such as existed in Algeria. The idea put forward by colonialism not only influenced the European minority, but also the Algerians. Total liberation is that which concerns all sectors of personality. So he's talking about I think he's talking about inter-liberation. 1D. I am not sure that anything I say here will actually unravel the complexity of Wretched for anyone, but I am sure that if one sincerely wishes to understand what's being said by Fanon in this book, then one must read it cover to cover at least twice. I've read it like 3 times and I'm still going to keep reading it over and over again because it is a good foundational work. Don't, for example, read only the first chapter and then think that you know Fanon's position on violence. Don't read the 11th paragraph of the first chapter without reading the last 4 paragraphs of the second chapter or the relevant lines of the 3rd chapter and think that you understand positions of race or racism. An incomplete reading means superficial understandings and a distortion of your own development. Moreover, I wouldn't suggest that one rely solely upon a book or paper by any author claiming to explain Fanon or Wretched from the perspective of any theme. Such material will probably prove useful in one way or another, but it is not a substitute for the real thing. Shortly after our discussion, Almacar sent me a copy of Fanon for Beginners, which has a chapter devoted to Wretched. I found the book and the chapter in question to be informative. However, I also found the author to have certain biases which lent themselves towards the inaccurate appraisal of Fanon and of Wretched. However, one gets from an easy read, i.e. Fanon for Beginners, will be less rewarding than that will result from the personal venture through the difficult process of going through the source and struggling with whatever obstacles one may encounter. You'll come away with self-confidence and an awareness appreciated all the more because it was achieved as part of the self-development undergoes by mastering your fears, completing an intellectual process that you at first thought too difficult to attempt. Such a process of self-transformation and intellectual development is the center theme of Wretched, starting explicitly or implicitly on nearly every page. 1.85 to 96, which I have right there, which we're going to read right now. In fact, here we go. In fact, we often believe with criminal superficiality that to educate the masses politically is to deliver a long political harangue. I'm gonna look up this word, everybody. It is. I'm gonna look up this word, everybody. Right back. I'm gonna see what it means. Harangue. Sorry, it's harangue. All right, let me read this. In fact, we often believe with criminal superficiality that to educate the masses politically is to deliver a long political harangue from time to time. We think that it is enough that the leader or one of his lieutenants should speak in a pompous tone about the principal events of the day for them to have fulfilled their bounden duty to educate the masses politically. Now, political education means opening their minds, awakening them, and allowing the birth of their intelligence. As Caesar said, it is to invent souls. Okay, that's it. Sweet. Read Wretched for yourself. Study it. Take as much time as you think necessary. Don't be put off by any apprehension or assumed complexities, wanting everything to come to you easy and fast. You are equal to the task, and you'll be better as you go along. Dare to struggle with yourself. Dare to learn and apply what you've learned to the transformation of your own world. 2. Speaking of subtitles, 2A. 2A is spontaneity. So, and I bet there's something to read maybe. Let's find out. Not yet. Okay, cool. This piece of subtitles, quote, for the NACs and other activists who struggle against racism and neocolonialism, capitalism, and for the setting afoot a new people, socialist, communist humanism. I've come to think of these meditations as an exercise in the process of creating a new African communist school of thought, developing in part through ideological struggles, theoretical development, and the critique of past and present institutions, concepts and practice, etc. Stretch yourself and consider, can we regard as a historical necessity that we are here today calling ourselves, not me, others, New African Communist, engaged collectively in the development of a shared worldview in struggle for a socialist society? Are we not carrying on the traditions that on one context goes back thousands of years to communalism or pre-Marxist communism, and in another context, modern, goes back on these shores at least to Peter H. Clark and the 1820s? We can say that we've already begun to share the schools as manifested by our practice, that the words we've produced and the lines and ideas we've tested over the years already lend themselves towards shaping a distinct body of thought. Can we pull from the journals, from Crossroads, from the New African Community Bulletin, and from the grassroots, from anything written by any of us, and say that we have examples of New African Communist thought? I'm not being purely rhetorical here. I'm suggesting that we should get more serious about who we are and what we should be doing. I'm suggesting that an affirmative answer can be given to the above about, but we also have to work at a more consciously and systematically. To be. Why call it New African Communism and not plain old communism? For much of the same reason, we continue to say Russian communism or Chinese communism because plain old communism will only exist in an ideal. There's theory and there's practice. Practice engaged on the basis of concrete conditions of one's own social situation. The actual construction of a communist society within any particular nation, only can only result in a form unique to the nation, no matter any similarities to the theory of communism held by other nations. Angolian, Russian, Algerian, Chinese, French, Vietnamese, Cuban, Korean, Tanzanian, these are all nationalities. Our nationality is New Africa. We don't refer to ourselves as black because we don't base our nationality nor our politics on race or color or a biological element of our being. Social factors are the primary determinants of our national identity and our politics. Why not call ourselves African Americans or American communists? For much the same reason that folks still talk about a black America and a white America. We are oppressed and exploited as distinct people, and the particular development and present reality of America is as a settler imperialist state prevents any such identification. Race has been used to help realize and perpetuate the material and sociological factors that make us a distinct people. America, i.e. the United States, is an empire with a distinct nationality, a worldview. So long as America means what it means to people here and throughout the world, and so long as we're oppressed as a distinct people, it's hard for me to see us ever calling ourselves Americans of any political persuasion. Why call it New Africa communism and not say Marxism or Marxist-Leninism? Well, on one hand, because Marx isn't a Marxist and Lenin wasn't a Leninist, because this kind of reductionism is part of the problem we face while sorting out what's relevant from the many other schools and trying to find our own way. Because, quote, the struggle against narrow interpretations of Marxism against Western-centered reductionism is part of the struggle for social and national liberation, of the struggle against ideological imperialism. We look back as far and as accurately as we can into the social thought and practice of people on the planet, and we say that we can see the original social economic formation that we can call pre-Marxist communism or communalism. There are collective use for meanings and instruments of social production prior to the development of huge surpluses, commodities, and their exchange value. The division of labor based on the exploitation of one group of people by another group of people. No concept of ownership or private property. As we now know it, group interests, gosh, I'm itching. Group interests were valued over individual ones, even while the individual was respected as an end in her or himself. Yet, always within the context of collective work and responsibilities, for no individual survived alone. The barber have a saying. The barber have a saying, quote, "Who am I without the others? I come to life. I was in their hands, and in leaving it, I will be in their hands." End quote. we outlined the primary characteristics of what type of formation those kinds of social relations, and together with the critique of the way we now live, we shape a vision of modern communalism. Only these days we call it communism. Marx called it scientific communism or scientific socialism, and he had particular contributions to that body of thought. However, we must remember that neither Marx nor any else single-handedly created what we now regard as the theory of communism. From the communalism of the past into today, untold numbers of individuals and people have made and are making contributions to that body of thought. As they struggled to proximate the ideal in their actual social situations, nor can we overlook the roots of the philosophical basis, i.e. dialectics and materialist worldview. That is, for example, as new African communists, when we begin to write out our text, we'll look at Egypt and other places along the southeastern coast of Africa as a source of understanding of the relations between thinking and being from the materialist standpoint. If Marx et al. Claim to rest on the Greeks, when it must be understood that the Greeks rested upon the Egyptians. The fact is, the Greeks were unable to reconcile, to absorb, or fully understand the systems that they were given, i.e., they were faced with the system that talked about the dialectical interactions of four elements as the source: earth, air, fire, and water. The Thales, for example, could only deal with water. The Democritus is another example, could only deal with air. This disjointed system was say passed down to Hegel. It was thus upsided, and then Marx made the switch on Hegel. He simply tried to write the distorted worldview of the Africans. Now in case you missed it, the four elements are material elements. They are part of the creation of mythology that describes the origins of the world as arising from within the world and not outside of it. You can call it, quote, primitive materialism if you like. And when you study and notice the dialectics within the philosophical system of these earlier Africans, you can call that, quote unquote, primitive dialects if you want. Or I think he's making a point. Or you can do as most of us so-called Africanists do and ignore these altogether. But there was the point of origin of what we today call dialectical materialism. Now, I know this subject needs more treatment, but it will have to be done at another time. How are we doing on time? We're doing good on time. Let me look ahead just in case. Looking ahead. Oh, there's one stopping point. Okay, I think in the stars are the stopping point. Yeah, the stars are the stopping point, looks like. Because I don't have another one until way 182. All right, where did I go? Oh, another time. Okay, perfect. 2C. So 2, conclusion, spontaneity. I don't know. Oh, it's that. Okay. And the reason why I can't go back on my book is because my book is not the same one he used. So I can't go back. I wish I could. The struggle against racism is in the spirit of Fanon, one in which we struggle to become anti-racist in both our thought and our practice. It is also an attempt to proximate the communist ideal, transcending the boundaries of racialized discourse and practice that were erected by the oppressive apparatus, and which serves to reproduce, reinforce, and sustain it. Because race and racism, like class and communism, will be discussed below, all I want to say here is, no matter how we see the relations between racism and capitalism, i.e., that they arose simultaneously, or that we perceive the other, I think they should always be mentioned together. That is, I believe it's counterproductive to ever talk about racism without immediately and thoroughly linking it to capitalism, so that no one can be unmindful of the need to struggle against capitalism if they claim to be anti-racist or against racism. Racism is used to justify and facilitate the exploitation of peoples, and it's based on the false belief that humanity is divided into a plurality of races and stand in relations to each other as inferior or superior based on the physical and or cultural differences. There are no races, only peoples and groups of peoples, united and distinguished by common history, social development, habits, interests, etc. Sometimes we call all of this nationality or ideology. To be anti-racist is, first of all, not to hold the false belief in an alleged plurality of races. To be against racism is to combat all beliefs and practices that facilitate the exploitation of peoples, particularly when such exploitation is supported by a social construction of race. Any attempt to destroy racism without an explicit link to the struggle against capitalism ultimately serves only to reinforce racist ideologies and to shield capitalism from attack. On the other hand, an attempt to combat capitalism without an explicit link to anti-racist discourse and struggle allows capitalism to use the belief in race held by oppressed peoples and appeal to the racism of citizens of the oppressive state, thus undermining all revolutionary initiatives. This combat also requires that we begin to delink ourselves from the use of language that reinforces and reproduces racial ideologies, i.e., the term white and black, in reference to the identity of peoples. This will be a difficult process because, one, the capitalist system depends upon continued use of such language, and its ideological apparatus is designed to impose and undermine all attempts to delink to peoples oppressed through means of racial ideology have come to accept these terms as legitimate and is therefore is their own, even as they tend to acknowledge the constructedness of race and the terms used to make a perpetuate this reality. It's reunification. References to the realness of race are the means through which race has a reality is constructed. Abby Fibber. We've always agreed that race is invented, but are then required to defer to its embeddedness in the world. Paul Gilroy. Those are just people saying stuff. Yeah. All right. Note of what? I don't know how to say it. Re-edification. I say it right? Re-edification. Some of the seeds of my present perspectives were given to me by Ngugi Wa Thiago in an article in which he discussed the thought and practice of writers under colonialism who, here's what he said, did not always adequately evaluate the real enemy. Imperialism was far too easily seen in terms of the skin pigmentation of the colonizers. Oh, colonizers. Labor was not just labor, but black labor. Capital was not just capital, but white-owned capital. Exploitation and its necessary consequences, oppression, were black. The vocabulary by which the conflict between colonial labor and imperialist capital was perceived and ideologically fought out consisted of white and black images, sometimes freely interchangeable with the terms Europe and Africa. And there's my third appeal. Third restriction. The sentence or the phrase was, quote, when the white man come to Africa, and not, quote, when the imperialists or the colonialists come to Africa, or one day these whites will go, and not one day imperialism or these imperialists will go. Except in the few cases, what was being celebrated in the writing was the departure of the white man, with the implied hope that the upcoming black man, by virtues of his blackness, would right the wrong and heal the wounds of centuries of slavery and colonialism. As a result of this reductionism to the polarities of color and race, the struggle of African people against European colonialism was seen in terms of a conflict of values between the African and European ways of perceiving and reacting to reality, by which African values, which white values, the values of European proletariat and the African proletariat, of the European imperialist bourgeoisie and the collaborationist African petty bourgeoisie, the values of African peasants and those of a European peasants, as an undifferentiated uniformity of Europeans or white values was posited against an equally undifferentiated uniformity of African or black values. In short, the writer and the literature he or she produced did not often take the hints, treat imperialism as an integrated economic, political, and cultural system whose negation had also to be an interrogated an integrate an in an in an in an integrate. Oh my gosh! I'll be right back. Okay, integrated economic, political, and cultural systems of its opposite, national independency, democracy, and socialism. Now, check this. Even as Thiago says all this, he himself differs to the embeddedness of race and its language as he critiques the reductionism to the polarities of race and color, more from habit and failure to follow through on his own logic. Thiago, and so many others these days, continues to see white when he means European or British or colonialism or capitalism. He continues to use black when he means Africa or how am I saying? Kenyan or Kenyan. The setting afoot of new people is taken from Fanon. The last line of his book is, quote, for Europe, for ourselves, and for humanity, comrades, we must turn over a new leaf. We must work out new concepts and try to set afoot a new man. Of course, we read and say new people, but the line captures for me that the book is really about what the struggle for decolonization or the national independency, what the struggle for socialism is about. To, quote, turn over a new leaf can mean In this instance, the creation of a new set of social relations, socialist social relations. On the basis of these relations, we seek the attainment of so high a level of consciousness in all members of society that the norms of law and morality merge into a single code of conduct for all members of the society. The phrase new people thus refers to an immediate new identity, a social related reality of the people as they struggle and upon reaching a stage of independence and a revolutionary seizure of power. It also refers to the ongoing struggle of development of social relations to carry us forward that ideal code of social conduct and economic arrangement. Check this. I love when he says check this. It's so cool. Who's in here? Zaid. Decolonization influences individuals and modifies them fundamentally. It brings a natural rhythm into existence introduced by new people and with a new language and a new humanity. Decolonization is invariably creation of new people. The thing which has been colonized becomes human during the same process by which it's free itself. I think it's important to keep this concept of the new people in mind as we think and move all through each day, especially as it relates to the objectives of the struggle, objectives that to be kept in mind no matter what the particular issue one deals with, because all issues are important, all are revolutionary, and all are related or to our need to help modify individuals. Simply put, the objective of the struggle is to modify the people. Humanism is mentioned several times by Fanon in the book, and as I pointed to earlier, the book is about the struggle for revolutionary socialist humanism, IG. The struggle for freedom does not give back. Okay, the struggle for freedom does not give back to the national culture its former value and shapes. This struggle, which aims at the fundamental different set of relations between people, cannot leave intact either the form or the content of the people's culture. After the conflict, there is not only a disappearance of colonialism, but also a disappearance of the colonized people. This new humanity cannot be otherwise than define a new humanism, both for itself and for others. It is prefigured in the objective and methods of the conflict, a struggle which mobilizes all classes of the people, in which express their aim and their impatience, which is not afraid to count almost exclusively on the people's support, will of necessity triumph. The humanism that we seek, a humanism that truly places its emphasis upon the social and political needs of the whole of the people, is the opposite of what passes as humanism under the bourgeoisie order. The bourgeoisie order claims to value the dignity and inherent worth of people, but its ideals of private property, individualism, and exploitation unmask the true concerns of capitalism in humane essence. The revolutionary socialist humanism that we seek has to be based on the collective social ownership for the major means of production and the end of exploitation and all forms of oppression, because only on this basis can all people be allowed the condition to fully develop as individuals and to realize the ideals of humanism. As we develop our new concepts and practice of humanism, we'll need to keep the struggle against patriarchy and all forms of gender oppression also up front. How can we claim to seek to create a social environment that will allow the full and free development of each person and not pull out all pillars of oppressive social relations. 3. A few words. What are we doing? Okay, I got 10 minutes. A few words on the preface up to Wretched. You may be tempted, as I was, to skip the reading of the preface, thinking it a poor substitution for the words of Fanon, or you may think it unnecessary to read what appears as one European's address or to other Europeans on purely European concerns. In either case, you'd be mistaken. Sartre says beforehand, essentially, that Fanon says on most of the major. There's another one. Jesus. Oh, I didn't get a chance to appeal it. What the hell? Jesus Christ. Sartre says beforehand, essentially, that Fanon says on most of the major themes of the book. I only take issue with the assertion made by Sartre, as you'll see below. Otherwise, the preface is as good as place as any to begin one's study of the Meditations upon Wretched. And I think, let me look. That might actually be a good stopping point. Right there. Because it's going to go into the preface. Struggles against racism, colonialism, and capitalism involve struggles between. Okay. Yeah. I think this might be a good stopping point. We got 10. See how many more pages? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh. I can do 3 more pages, but I don't know. Let's do 3 more pages. What do you think?
I think this is a good stopping point.
Yeah? Did you read more?
Yeah. I was only talking about how it ended in a way that was I'm taking care of the house right now. I wasn't able to read. I just came up because I thought it was the end.
Oh yeah, no, you're good. 162 is the ending. We'll start on 162 tomorrow. That seems like a good stopping point. What's up? What did you want to talk about? What you got? What you got for me, huh?
I think it's brought up an important point that a lot of people have done reduction into singular issues when, as Audre Lorde put it, no one lives a single issue life. But yeah, it brought up how people would reduce things to singular issues and not notice the whole thing. And I think that a lot of I think that happens to more than just Fanon, but I think that happens to I think it happens to Black authors the most when it comes to people reading them, especially white people reading Black authors, is we oftentimes reduce them to thoughts on the thoughts of race, and that when they are a whole person, not just their race.
Yeah. What's your thoughts about what they said that, like, we need to recognize the race and stuff like that, but stop talking the lingo?
I do get it. And the word reification, I noticed you were stumbling on. But I think Do you know what reification means by
Go ahead and let me
chance?
know what it is.
No, I'm just checking with you because I do know of the word, but I don't remember its definition.
Okay.
I think we both should look it up.
I don't know how to spell it. Let me get it. Um, that's what. It shouldn't be too far. Not too many people around here.
REIF.
Hold on.
Oh, okay.
Oh yes. I gotta putting on my tablet, like always. There it goes.
Okay.
Okay. Still waiting on it. Tablets take forever to get going. RE.
Okay. So, wait, where did my comic go? Shit. Oh, okay. REIFICATION.
Wait. EION.
No, T, like a Tyrannosaurus.
Is there a C?
R. No, okay. I'm just going to respell it again.
Yes.
REIFICATION.
The treating an abstract concept, idea, or social relations as if it were a concrete, physical, intangible object.
Oh, so like basically assuming something is rather than like questioning whether or not it exists in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Okay.
got it.
Yeah. So you got to recognize it, that its existence. And I like that how he talked about how like the superstructure impacts the material base, and the material base raises out the superstructure, and the material base is like you can't talk about capitalism and ending capitalism without talking about anti-racism too. So that was good. I'm glad that they brought that up. So that was
Yeah,
good for me.
and as for like the lingo thing,
Hmm.
I do get it. And I do get that like when it comes to language, people think that they're just saying what they mean, when in actuality uh, they're saying things that are close to what they mean, but it's actually loaded with meaning that's gotten through its usage in the past to the present. And I do get the whole changing the language thing, which is why I'm constantly like questioning the words I use whenever I learn about like a system or something like that, or a new aspect that I did not know of about a system. I constantly ask, okay, does this contribute to the normalization of a certain thought pattern? And there are a lot of words that I have come to the conclusion do contribute to thought patterns, but I have I don't know about because I don't know what language we would like that would be determined by like people oppressed by race. like they're going to be the ones to determine that language. But if they give a sorry, what?
Remember, you're part of the settler status.
Yes, I know that's why I'm saying people who are oppressed by race and who are oppressed by settlerism, they are the ones that are going to determine what words are used because they are the most affected. But I do get the logic of recognizing what's going on without using the language that justifies it. Because whenever you say something, it's loaded with all of the experiences of its past usage.
Another restriction. Look at this. One right after another. Jesus Christ. All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. We'll go ahead and close it out, and we'll start again tomorrow. So I appreciate everybody.